Hey, it's Christina, and today we're going to talk all about your new shrub, how to plant it and care for it so that it gets established in your landscape and thrives for years to come. So the first step is planting. In an ideal world, you would plant it either in the morning or the evening when the temps aren't quite as intense and neither is the sun. But if you can't do that, don't worry. I've planted many shrubs and many plants when it's crazy hot out, and they still have lived to thrive. Now, before you actually get started, you want to check the soil moisture of your plant. You can either do that with your finger or a moisture meter. Just make sure that it is nice and moist, not too wet, not too dry. But if it's super dry, water it and come back in a few hours. Now to dig the hole. This is crucial. It is better to plant your plant a little too high than too deep. So when you're digging, you want to dig the hole just as deep as the container, so that the soil level in the pot will match the soil level in your garden. In terms of width, it just needs to be wide enough so that you can work in that space once the plant is back in the hole, so that you can get the soil pressed nicely down around the root ball. One note is that if you do have really dense soil, you can dig a hole that is wider, like 1.5, 2 times the size of your plant, so that the roots have an easier time getting established out into that new space. But this is a sandy loam, so I don't have to do that. So we've got a hole. I don't know if it's deep enough or wide enough, so I'm going to take the container and put it in there and just check the soil level of the soil that's in my garden with the soil that's in the container. One nice way to do that is with your shovel, because it is going to give you a long, even line from space to space, and you can kind of just observe if those look like they're lining up. So that looks good to me. It looks like it's at the right depth. And now to get my plant out of the container, I will put my hand on the soil surface like this, and I will tip the pot over and gently remove it. Now, if you have a lot of roots that are meeting the outside edge of your pot, you're going to rough up those roots with your fingers so that they can grow out into the garden. Now, I'm putting it in the hole, and once I have it in the hole, that looks like it's down a little too deep. So I'm going to add a little bit more soil back in. And that looks better. That looks much better. So now I'm going to actually take a step back and take a look at my shrub. See if it is leaning too far in one direction. And if it is, I'll add a little soil under the root ball to make that change. Now, one thing to determine when you are putting your shrub in the garden is which angle will you be viewing it from. For this shrub, that's obviously right here, because nobody's going to be looking at it from the back of the house. So you'll want to twist it so that the best side of the shrub is facing out. I think this is a little flat, so I'm going to twist the shrub and see if I can have a better angle. Perfect. So you'll essentially just adjust bit by bit so that it is straight up and down in the hole from all directions. So now I'm going to go over there. Now that part of the planting process is important. Don't skip it, because a shrub is an investment and you want it in your landscape for a long time. Most shrubs are woody, so the way that they're planted in the ground is the way that they will stay unless you prune something off. So you want it to be nice and straight in the hole all the way around. Now that we know that this shrub is exactly how it's supposed to be positioned, we will fill the hole back in with the native soil only. Now, I know you might be wondering, some people add fertilizer into the hole. I don't. A shrub from the nursery has enough fertilizer in it to last for at least the first year. And there's always a chance when you're adding fertilizer into the hole that it will come in direct contact with those fragile roots, and the roots don't like that. It could burn them. So that is why we just use the native soil. And as you are filling the hole, fill it all the way around nice and evenly and press hard as you go so that you will prevent any air pockets from forming against those roots. An air pocket by the root would just mean that those roots couldn't reach any water or nutrients. So it's important to firm up that soil all the way around the root ball. Now that our shrub is in the ground, we will water it in immediately. If you're planting a lot of shrubs, try to water them each in after they are planted and not all at once at the very end, because they are fresh in the ground and they are drying out. So it's good to just get them started off right on the right foot immediately. The best way to water our shrubs is to water all the way around and give them a lot of water each time. A new shrub likes to be watered very thoroughly, less often, instead of a little bit all the time or a lot all the time. This is because the shrub is going to get established in the landscape easier because that kind of watering actually mimics a rain event. They're getting a lot of water all at once, and it encourages the roots to grow out into its environment to look for that water. Now you might be wondering why I have watered first instead of applying mulch first. It's really negligible. I like to water first so that I can see if the soil has settled really noticeably around the plant and kind of has created a hole around it, because in that case I want more soil in there so that that soil surface remains level. A little bit of a divot will mean that that plant is having water collect maybe more than it should around that root ball, which it will not like. So I will come back in a little bit and see if the soil has settled, and once I see that it hasn't, I will add my mulch on top. All right, our plant is in, our water has absorbed into the soil, and it's time to apply our mulch. We are going to apply a 2 to 3 inch thick layer of mulch. That is thick enough so that it will help suppress weeds and help the soil retain moisture, but not too thick so that it eventually collapses in on our plants and makes them do all kinds of crazy things. If you want to know what those are, you can leave a comment below or you can email me. So we'll apply our mulch around the plant. There are lots of different kinds that you can use. I recommend just using what's locally available. So that might be shredded bark mulch, that might be pine needles. Use what's available. And when you're applying it, make sure that it's not touching the stems of your plant. Now, obviously, I would need a lot more to fill this bed up, which is what I recommend you do. Now, in areas between plants, you can put the mulch a little bit thicker if you really want to suppress weeds. It might look a little funky, but around your plants, 2 to 3 inches thick will be perfect. So now let's talk about fertilizing. So like I said, in its first year, most shrubs do not need any extra fertilizer applied because they've already got enough from the pot that they were grown in, and they're busy. They're busy building a root system and their foliage, and sometimes fertilizer can be a little overwhelming. But when you do get to applying fertilizer, you will read the packaging and apply it all the way around the outside by kind of like the drip line, which is where the edge of the leaves are and the water would drip off the plant. And that will help it be in the spot where the rain will come, or you'll water it in because you're supposed to, and then that will get right to those roots that are actively growing out into the soil. Now, I don't recommend piling it up around your plant because that can create too much of a concentration of those nutrients, and when that gets down into the roots, it could burn them. So sprinkle it around and apply less than more. Not all shrubs actually require fertilizer. Some of them are just fine working with what is already available in the soil. If you have a heavy feeder like roses or butterfly bush or roses of Sharon, absolutely feel free to apply a granular fertilizer formulated for flowering shrubs in the springtime. If you've noticed that your plant has diminished flowering, you can apply some more in early summer. Now, for gardeners in cool climates, be sure not to apply any fertilizer after mid-July. And that's because the nitrogen in that fertilizer encourages our plants to grow new foliage. And that new foliage is vulnerable to frosts that happen in fall and in winter. If you live in a warm climate, don't worry about it. So now that our shrub is planted, let's talk about how you're going to monitor it for its first year in the ground. because a year is about how long it takes for a new shrub to get established in its new environment. So obviously watering is a big deal. Like I said, a new shrub prefers to be watered more thoroughly, less frequently. So to check before you water, you can either use your finger or a moisture meter. A moisture meter is very helpful for those of us who do not trust our fingers, but you will essentially test and around the outside of the root ball of the shrub and see, does that feel moist at all? And if so, just wait, because you want the soil to be either dry or almost dry, and then water thoroughly. Now this obviously all depends on the type of shrub that you have. Some love water, some are really drought tolerant. So try and base your watering schedule off of the plant tag and what it says there. Now, when we leave a plant to dry out a little bit between waterings, that is setting it up for future success. A plant is a lot more likely to die from overwatering than underwatering, especially if you are a happy, eager gardener. After you've planted your beautiful new shrub, you will probably be looking at it and wanting to watch it grow. Now, you could be very excited or you could be a little disappointed because some shrubs don't put on a lot of noticeable above ground growth in their first year because they are working very hard underground. It takes a lot of energy to build a root system because that root system then supports all of the above ground foliage and the resulting flowers. So you might get lucky and you might have a shrub that gets its root system established very quickly and then puts out a lot of above ground growth and even flowers. But if your plant isn't doing that, it doesn't mean that it's not thriving, and it doesn't mean that it's not actually growing. Now, to make sure that your plant is actually growing underground, just keep monitoring that water situation and try to leave it alone. If you notice that something funky is happening to your plant right after you planted it, it might be in shock. This is especially common for plants that have a lot of flowers on them because flowers are energetically expensive. So if you notice that your plant is drooping really dramatically, try cutting the flowers off. I know that this is probably painful, but it will save your plant a lot of energy. There are a lot of things that you might notice during your first year of monitoring and beyond. If you have any questions about your shrub's performance, what a problem might be, if it's a problem, always feel free to reach out to us. Go to provenwinnerscolorchoice.com, contact us, and write us about your plant problem. Include pictures if you can. But with proper planting and care, your shrub is already well on its way to long-term success. I hope that you found these tips helpful. If you did, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you again next time.